I shoved a clacking hand off my rail while the anchor chain screamed, and a voice hummed a shanty I never learned. Bone rattled on wood. The lantern sputtered and breathed smoke. I swung an oar and caught a wrist and a jaw. Teeth skittered. The thing slid back into the dark with barely a splash. The knocking had started at dusk, soft and patient. Knock, knock, knock. It ran with the tide. When the tide lifted me, it knocked higher. When it fell, it knocked lower. I told myself it was driftwood. I said that out loud. "It's just trash," I said. My hands were salty and cut from the chain. There was dry blood in the nails. I tasted iron every time I licked them. I was stuck there because my engine coughed itself dead the day before. Gunk in the filter. I had anchored off the lee of a little sand dot because it was that, or drift farther out. No trees on the island. No one. Just a line of old footprints above the tide. Toes forward. A long stride. Deep like someone heavy, but no flesh in the print. I saw them from the dinghy and felt dumb for looking. I didn't go ashore. I told myself I'd fix the engine in the morning and leave before noon. By midnight, the anchor chain ground in little jerks. The boat swung and the rope creaked like an old doorway. The wind died. The canvas was stiff and salty. My radio spat and cracked when I tried it. "Mayday, this is small craft off. Static. Any vessel on this channel, do you copy?" Static. The little red light blinked and blinked. The knocks kept time and something started humming from the water. It wasn't a song I knew. No words. Just a tuneless rise and fall like old men chewing. No breath in it. No breaks. It reached up under the hull and buzzed in my teeth. I lit the lantern and hung it low. I should have saved the fuel. I set some lines along the rail. Fish hooks. Bits of wire. Anything with a point. I told myself it was overkill. I told myself I was just tired. Lightning stitched the cloud line once and I saw them. Not faces. Skulls. Shoulders. Ribs glowed green when the wake rolled over them. Old naval rags hung in strips, heavy with water and salt. Rusted hooks and rings on stringy cords. They raised hands. They bumped the hull with their knuckles and their heads. Knock. 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 I threw a flare into the smothered sky. It hissed and spat. Red burned over the island and the flats. A dozen of them showed clear for half a second. Empty eye holes. Jawbones. Bits of rope through ribs like lacing. They didn't look up. They just reached for my boat, like it was something they were owed. I tried the engine again when the flare died. It coughed and died, same as before. I swore at it and hit the panel. The chain moaned under me. The anchor wouldn't set right and wouldn't come free either. I went forward and tried to feed out more line. It was jammed. A knot of scale and salt. I dug at it until my knuckles slipped. Skin came off in a peel and the metal took it without caring. "Back off," I said. "Back off." The humming didn't stop. It came closer, up the sides, across the deck, like someone walked and hummed at the same time. I swung the oar at shadows. I invented and hit air and hit the rail and hurt my hands more. The lantern burned low and popped, then steadied. Toward dawn the tide fell and they sank with it. I sat on the cabin roof and watched the island turn pink. The footsteps up the beach started and ended at the high tide line now. New ones. Fresh squares in the scuff. I didn't like the look of the sand. It was too clean where it had no right to be clean. Daylight gave me guts. I pulled the filter apart and rinsed it with fuel, spit, anything. I found black jelly in it. I went over the side with a knife when the sun was high. The water was clear and hot and tasted like metal. The chain went down into a mat of weed and old lines. A jawbone sat in the weed like it had grown there. I kicked, and the weed made that green light. The phosphorescence spilled off my knees and slid down my arms. I cut at a tangle and brushed the jaw by accident. It turned in the water, and the teeth talked across the blade. I came up hard and knocked my head on the hull. I tried to re-anchor out where the bottom dropped, but the chain held something I didn't own. Every time I pulled, it pulled back. The boat spun and complained. The creak sounded heavier. The day turned over too fast. That second night, the knocks started right on time. Higher now. The hum came with them. 100 notes. None of them notes. The lantern wouldn't stay lit. It sputtered and threw smoke that smelled like pennies. I kept it going with breath and little prayers. I radioed again. "This is the cutter." I stopped, because that was a lie. "This is a sailing vessel off a desert island. Engine down. I have borders." I hated that word, but I said it. If anyone hears me, I have borders. The speaker coughed out my own voice, a second behind. Then nothing. They came up over the gunnels at midnight. Fingers first. 4 of them on the stern. 1 near the bow. Hooks caught my lines and pulled them clean with no flesh to snag. I hit the first one with the oar, square on the crown. It was like hitting a ball. Bone clacked and rolled. It climbed anyway. Light hit empty holes. The jaw chattered like what stupid people do when they're cold. The oar splintered. I used both ends. "Get off!" I shoved and kicked. The deck was wet with sea and sweat. The bones were slick and hard and dry at the same time. My hooks dragged down their arms and made no mark. They didn't bleed. They made that rattle sound on the planks that no living thing makes. One got his hook around my ankle. The hook was old and dull, but it bit anyway. It felt like a coin cutting me. I went down. Hands reached for my neck. Old rings snapped against my ear. For a second I smelled something old and sour and couldn't place it. Then my lantern popped and shot a black ribbon of smoke and the thing shied back. Just enough. I pushed off the rail with both feet and that pulled me free. Skin tore. It hurt like a clean cut. I rolled and got to my feet and stomped its hand until the bones spread. The pieces tried to close again without tendons. They went over the side when the tide turned. That was the rule. They came with the water. They left with it. The last one hummed as it sank. I heard it even after it was under. The hum stayed on deck for a long time, under my boots. I slept in bursts that morning. The sun burned through the canvas and made it stink. I taped my ankle with sail tape and spit and told myself that was fine. I drank water slow in case I had to go longer. I set more lines, better this time, tight and low where they'd grab. I made a row of hooks out of bent nails and slid them on a cord. I tied a flare to the boat hook and left it by the wheel. I told myself I'd try the engine again at dead noon, when the tide rested and the drain would be kind. At noon, the engine coughed and spun and then quieted. I got it once, and it went again, loud and wrong, and I threw it into gear anyway. Because fear is dumb. The chain took that wrong as a dare. We jerked forward a foot and then backward 2. The bow dove and the stern climbed. The whole hull shook. The anchor chain ground along itself and screamed again, that higher scream that crawls out of metal. I killed the engine and put my head on the wheel. I tried to cut the chain then. I knew I couldn't. I tried anyway. I went forward with a hacksaw and a bad plan. The blade did nothing but sand the links bright. My hands were slick and the saw squealed and the sound called them, I think. Or maybe it didn't and they were already coming. Thunder rolled out there where the sky sat. I got a little wind and yanked on the halyard until the salt-stiff canvas lurched up. It cracked hard and then slumped. No purchase. No angle. The boat just nodded at the island like it understood something I didn't. A little after dark, the knock came from everywhere. They didn't test anymore. They came. The green light washed over their ribs when they rose. It caught on the wet edges and made them look lit from inside. I hurled the boat hook and the flare lit and fell and bounced and burned between them in the water. It showed me a field of heads. Rags moved like weeds around them. Hooks glinted. Rings on cords twisted. They never looked up. They boarded in lines, 2 on the port, 3 on the starboard, 1 after another, timing it when the swell lifted them. They were smart at that. Their fingers bit the wood the way a screw bites. They climbed with no breath, no talk, and they hummed. It was the same shanty, still tuneless, still wrong. It sounded like a thing that wanted to be a song and couldn't. I fought them with the broken oar until it was no use. Then I fought with the boat hook until a hook snagged it and took it. Then I used the lantern and burned the first one until the rags fell and it cracked from heat. It fell apart like stacked plates and then tried to stand again. I kicked the skull hard enough to feel the neck go. The lower jaw stayed in my boot print, teeth up. I screamed for help to the radio and it just gave me myself again, thin and late. I have borders, the little box said in my voice, and I hated it. They got behind me then. Dry fingers on the back of my neck. A hook around my left arm. 2 on my right. The humming came from right at my ear. No breath with it. The smell was salt and old rope in deep bilge. They picked me up, maybe 6 of them, or 4, and the others pushed. I hit the rail. They bent me over it slow. The water hissed below and flashed green. Bone pressed into my ribs. I couldn't move much. They had me right. Someone else climbed up behind them and stood. I didn't see it at first. I felt the deck change a little. They crowded closer in front of me and the humming cut off. It was quiet for the first time in nights. I turned my head as far as I could. A skull stood near the mast, white and clean like the inside of a shell. The rags on that one was whole enough to look like a coat. A length of old braid hung on the shoulder. Rings clacked together on the spine. It had a long knife, not sharp, more like a cutlass eaten down. It looked at me, or I felt looked at. The others waited. One of them drooled little shells out of its mouth with no tongue to do it. The captain's skull turned, cut my line, and knocked the others back. He didn't cut the chain. He cut the bit of sheet they had around me. One swipe, dry metal on old rope, and I slid free and hit the deck wrong. He stepped forward and cuffed the nearest skull with the back of the blade like a father slaps a boy. Bones flew. The humming started again, but it sounded afraid now, if a hum can. He moved quick. He wasn't soft about it. He knocked them into the scuppers and over. He cracked wrists and ankles like sticks. The deck shook from the bodies hitting it and the rattle after. I crawled backward to the wheel. My ankle ran with bright blood and the tape came loose. I didn't stand. I didn't look at him. I don't know why. I didn't want to see what his eye holes did. The tide turned while the deck cleared. That was the rule. They went with it. He hit the last one across the back and pushed it over without looking. Then he looked at me again. I heard the rings on his ribs tick. Something fell. A small sound, like a coin on deck. He went to the rail and stopped. He hummed one line of that broken shanty. He did it with no lungs. Then he dropped backward and took the water without a splash. The hum stayed for a breath and went under. I sat there until the lantern died for good. I sat there until the sky went gray. The chain ground a little, quieter, like it had found an easier place to lie. In the morning I found the thing that fell. It was a ring. Not a gear, not a shackle. A ring for a finger. It was black in the grooves and green in the pits. The top had a tiny plate on it with letters worn thin. My initials. Not just the same letters. The way I write them when I scratch them on tools. The curl on the last one bent the wrong way, like I do when I'm hurried. I don't know how it got that. I don't know why he spared me. I still hear the knock now. Some nights, when the tide turns and the chain aches. And I keep the ring in the drawer by the radio and don't touch it. And I don't hum anything, not even to myself. I hope you enjoyed that one. Sometimes these stories stay with you longer than you expect. If you'd like to hear more, subscribe for the next night's story. Like the video if you enjoyed it, and maybe watch another before the lights go out. See you in the next one.